Here's some side stories, some of which have actually been published on Wattpad, some of which, as I said, I may turn into chapters. There was a challenge by someone to come up with a story that used all 5 senses. And what I came up with was a demonstration of the Ultima weapon. For those not acquainted with the Ultima weapon, there is a famous dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV called the Praetorium. It is famous not only for being mandatory as part of the storyline, but also for having 30 minutes of unskippable cutscenes, including in particular a speech by Gaius von Belsar explaining just why he was justified to conquer the land. It ends for, "It is only right that I should take your realm, for none among you has the power to stop me." This was said for shortly before you beat him in hand-to-hand combat, after which he retreats to a giant mecha and lets loose an energy weapon called Ultima. It was big. Those are airships in the foreground being disintegrated by it. Well, how big an audience do I want? I'm putting them on YouTube afterwards. Anyway, that's the Ultima weapon. That's the aftermath of the Ultima weapon. And this is the story about the Ultima weapon from Steve's perspective. I had told Tsu'na that the Ultima weapon demonstration in the Praetorium was like a nuclear explosion. Not that I have personal experience of what a nuclear explosion is like. I suppose now I can experience one and simply wake up at my home point, but that's not something I particularly want to do. So I was basing that statement on scale. It was big. It was very big. It took out Imperial airships. It hollowed out the entire base. Might not have been Hiroshima scale, but it didn't have to be since it was being used on a more personal basis than that. So maybe what they refer to in science fiction and, for all I know, military briefings, as a tactical nuke, which means a comparable nuke would be smaller than Fat Man or a Little Boy, maybe beer keg sized. It still wasn't fun to happen right in front of me. Heidel and Shield protected us for the most part, but it didn't completely spare us from the experience. We weren't, for example, blinded by the flash, but it did fill our vision, getting bigger and brighter until it at least looked like we were inside the sun. I couldn't see Gaius or his big-ass mecha. I couldn't see Tsu'na. I doubt I could have seen my hand in front of my face. I don't think I could have seen my eyelids when I closed my eyes. Then there was the heat and the pressure. I wasn't knocked off my feet because it was all around me, squeezing in on me, trying to crush me. The shield kept it at bay, but it was still difficult to breathe. My chest didn't want to expand. My knees wanted to buckle from what felt like tremendous weight. I think my eardrums threatened to rupture. As the light and heat and pressure faded, I tried to catch my breath and choked on the air. It smelled and tasted of metal. All the metal the Garleans loved so much, making up the base that was then hot vapor. I yanked a bolt of lemon from my inventory and covered my face with it, trying to filter a little bit of oxygen from the metallic atmosphere. Then the ringing began. My tortured ears were able to function, but they weren't happy about their job. I healed so quickly in Eorzea that I hoped it would eventually go away, but before that could happen, I got to listen to Belsar's voice belting, blasting through his Dino Mecha's loudspeakers. I had already gotten tired of his helmet-filtered voice when he was raving about his justifications for conquest, and in his mecha it was 10 times as loud and at least that much more annoying, especially with the ringing providing background. It didn't matter that I had run prey in the game back on Earth. It didn't even matter that I had farmed prey for poetics and mogdoms until I could hear Belsar's damn speech in my sleep. Nothing could have prepared me for the first-hand experience of the Ultima weapon going off from a few yards away. Nothing that I'd have wanted to go through anyway. It was only later that I could appreciate Tsu'na going through it a second time just to support me. When we got done in there, when the dust of battle had settled and we, the strong, had dictated the fate of the weak, fuck you, Belsar, and we had evacuated, Tsu'na found a quiet place we could go to hide. A small room, a bare floor, a single lantern. It was enough. It was all I wanted, and she knew that from experience. The speeches and the adulation could come later. All I wanted was to not experience anything for a little while. We didn't talk. We didn't touch. She covered the lantern a bit. We sat in the dark. Eventually, my ears stopped ringing. This was a different challenge, one that was in a Final Fantasy XIV fanfic Discord server. The challenge was write your character in an office environment. This is called Table by Tsu'na. I started work today. I was given a badge on a string that I was told to wear when not at my desk. The badge also opens doors and makes the elevator work. While I was led to my office, I saw many people working in boxes. I thought since I was new I would be working in a box as well, but instead I was shown to a room and told it was to be mine. It had a desk with a computer near a window, a set of shelves near the desk, and a table with chairs in front of the desk. This is all for me? Burton smiled. You'll be resolving disputes. It's better to do that in private so people can feel free to say what they want. Plus, it keeps the yelling contained. Yelling? It happens. Daryl from IT came to show me how to log into my computer and to use Office. Melissa from HR showed me my calendar and my ticket list, and how to look for information about people, which I should do before dealing with the ones mentioned in a ticket. I spent much of the morning looking at email and watching training videos and exploring the system to find out what I could do. Melissa came to say she was going to a nearby restaurant for lunch, but I decided to stay and eat in my room for the first day. I was content with a braised pork pie, but perhaps I should see what the neighborhood has to offer. Burton came to my room after lunchtime. So, had a chance to get settled in? I think so. Good. Ready to handle your first ticket? This surprised me. So soon? Best to jump right in. And I'm eager to see how you go about it, so I'll be sitting in on this one. It's the Hoffler Daniels one. Why don't we say 2 o'clock? That'll give you some time to prepare. I found the ticket and read through the complaint. Bob Hoffler and Cassie Daniels had been having arguments, apparently about a relationship between them. They had been loud and disruptive. I looked at the information about each of them. I did not yet know what I would do about it, except hear what they had to say. At 2 o'clock, I moved from my desk to the table. There was a knock at the door, and Burton showed Bob and Cassie in. They looked uncomfortable having Burton there, but they could not ask the owner of the company to leave. They sat across from each other at the table, and Burton sat across from me. I needed to remain calm. I was not selling my first bearskin. I was solving my first people problem. Mr. Hoffler, Miss Daniels, do you both understand why you are here? Neither of them spoke at first. Neither of them looked at the other or at me. Finally, Cassie said, I'm here because he won't leave me alone. You never told me to, Bob muttered. It should have been obvious. Can't you take a hint? Well, like all the other hints you gave me? Sashaying up to my desk, giving me those smiles, leaning in like that. What was I supposed to think? You're supposed to think that when I'm not talking to you, I don't want you talking to me. They both started talking at once. Louder, faster, louder still. Burton had been right about the yelling. Perhaps there were words I could have used. I did not have them. What I had was growing anger and a desire to simply hand them weapons and lead into an arena. I knew it was my job to solve problems, but this did not feel like my problem. Husband and I both understand that there are things more easily said without words. It is why he once ruined a lot of furniture in the pit. It is why I sometimes destroy striking dummies outside the workshop. It is why I stood up as the two argued, raised my fist, and drove it through the table, splitting it in two. All three of them, including Burton, stood up quickly and got away from the collapsing table. They were all very quiet. I kept my eyes on the table as I found words. Mr. Hoffler, the company files show a number of complaints against you by women who say you talk to them even after they have said they do not want you to. You should perhaps study the meaning of the word no. Cassie started to laugh. I did not look at her. Ms. Daniels, the company files show a number of complaints by you against men who mostly answered with things like, she approached me. You should perhaps stop using HR to end your relationships for you. Cassie fell silent. This company does advertising. This company pays people to come and do advertising. It does not pay people to do relationships. If you cannot do relationships and advertising, both doing relationships must end. Is this clear? They both started talking at once. Is this clear? After a moment, they both answered, Yes, ma'am. Good. Please leave now. I did not look up as they left. I did not look up as the door closed. I did not look at Burton. I am sorry. I will replace the table. Hey, it's fine. I'll have maintenance bring up another. I make furniture. I can replace the table. Great. Be sure to invoice us for the materials then. Melissa can show you how. I did not handle that well. What are you kidding? That was the most efficient resolution I've seen in a long time, and it's one they'll probably remember. I wish we had you in here years ago. I looked up at him. He was smiling. He seemed sincere, though he also does advertising, so perhaps he is good at seeming sincere. Thank you. Sure. Why don't you close out this ticket and review materials for the rest of the day? You can do the next one tomorrow. He left. People from maintenance came by later to remove the broken table. I wonder if husband will laugh about this. I wonder how long he will. Button Button is a somewhat longer piece. If I'm going to use it at all, it's probably going to be in book 4. It contains some spoilers, I'm afraid. And this, in case it isn't obvious, is from Steve's perspective. Actually, there were certain requirements. This answered a prompt, certain words that absolutely had to be in there, and I put them in. Exercise to the reader to figure out what the words were. I look in the mirror and I see a Makot. Big brown eyes, slightly pursed lips, honey blonde hair, long furry ears. I turn to the side and try to look over my shoulder to get a full view of the tail, which is the same color as the hair. In the process, I can't help but notice the breasts. It's a face and a body I've seen almost every day over the past few years, just never from the inside. This is what I get for agreeing to couples therapy at a magical university. I didn't think we actually needed it. We're warriors and creators and explorers. I'm used to the idea that there's nothing we can't overcome together, nothing over the horizon that we can't march ahead together and see. But the problem wasn't us together, it was us apart. While I was having the time of my life here, getting some of my questions answered, exposing myself to new concepts, and challenging myself in wholly new ways, Tsu'na was running into obstacles on her own. New difficulties and even prejudices she hadn't encountered before. I tried to understand. I tried to sympathize. I tried to support. I was ready to rise in righteous indignation and hew a path through everything for her. But that wasn't what she wanted. She was just as capable as I am when it comes to both brains and brute force. What she wanted was for me to know, and apparently that was something I couldn't do from my position. She mentioned this to a friend she'd met while auditing a class, and the friend had told her about the university counselors and how maybe a third party could help with communication. So I went to a counselor with her, not knowing if it would really help, but wanting to make an effort for her. And a woman old enough to be Original Me's daughter told us that old saying about how to truly understand someone one needed to walk a mile in their shoes. The feet. I looked down at the feet. I knew they were smaller than mine, but I didn't expect them to feel that way. Once she explained the procedure and we talked it out and agreed, she called up a specialist to perform a ritual that moved our consciousnesses between our bodies. It took us a while after that just to learn how to move. Our balance was totally off, and we weren't used to the height differences. But we got to where we could walk across the room and sit down without looking stupid. She gave us a box with 2 buttons. The effect is somehow tied to the box, so that any time we push the buttons, 1 button each, it'll collapse and we'll be back in our original bodies. We can't do it alone. We have to do it together. Which on reflection is pretty damn scary. I'm surprised anyone goes along with it. Maybe it doubles as one of those trust exercises. So we took our box and each other and went back to our apartment. We spent the evening just getting used to the situation, to each other, to the new dynamic of the 2 of us together. I never appreciated how strong her neck must be just from looking up at me all the time. She only bumped her or my head once on a cabinet. I managed to not shut my or her tail in a door. It was a little reminiscent of our first days on Earth when I had to coach Tsu'na on how to use a body that had a fully functional digestive tract. This time, however, we were coaching each other. We each knew in principle how the other did things, but there was still an issue of look and feel. In that regard, the shower was entertainingly exploratory. But the real issues, the ones that prompted this exercise in the first place, would come during the day. While my schedule included a lecture on transplanar cosmology and a roundtable type class on spatial manipulation, she had a materials conjuring class. So far, none of the classes we attended were official. We were effectively guest fellows, as opposed to our actual status, which was closer to refugees. We figured materials conjuring would be useful. If it meant we could make stuff at home, rather than needing to travel all over the place to harvest it. We got a copy we got a copy of the textbook the class used and practically took it apart, studying and practicing and experimenting and improvising and coming up with our own ways of doing things. What they were teaching in class wasn't enough for industrial quantities of things we needed, like buttloads of steel, but it was fine for small amounts of metals to use in accessories, which meant Tsuna didn't absolutely need to attend the class. But she thought maybe the instructor had some practical wisdom to share that wasn't in the books that she'd pick up if she was there long enough. So far, the signal to noise ratio has been low. Plus, she wanted the classroom experience. She had never done the Charlayan University thing that half the scions talked about and wanted to fill in the blank. So she told me the building and room number, and I headed off in the late morning and immediately saw the difference in our experiences. From apartment hallway to apartment lobby to campus quad to building hallway to classroom, I got looks that I never got as me. Some were curious, some were pointed, almost indignant, some were otaku grade fascination. I tried the same casual smile and nod I normally give to people and got mixed results ranging all the way from embarrassed scurrying away to hostile glares. Halfway there, I simply stopped making eye contact. I got more of the same once I got to the classroom, though scattered about the room. The people sitting near me talked to each other and specifically not to me. I tried to ignore them as effectively as they were ignoring me. I pulled out my laptop and looked up information on the class I was missing. Spatial manipulation is important in a lot of ways. It may be how our inventories work unless they're pocket dimensions. I was only beginning to get a handle on the difference between the two. It was engrossing enough that I didn't pay a lot of attention when the lecture began. I came up for air long enough to pick up a word or two, but it wasn't anything Tsu'na and I hadn't already gotten from the text. It took a nudge from a neighbor to realize the teacher was practically shouting at me. It didn't help that he was doing it wrong. Miss Catgirl! In all fairness, I didn't remember his name either, and he had more names to keep track of than just mine. But still. Are you are you addressing me? I am Mrs. Yurkat. When I gave you permission for you to be in my class, I assumed you would appreciate it and make an effort. Other students here don't have the luxury of being my guest. I gathered he was being pissy about the laptop. I didn't look to see if anyone else has theirs out. I am familiar with the material you are covering today. Really? You know it so well you don't need to pay attention? Well, by all means, show us your knowledge. Come down here and synthesize some copper for us. Show us how it's done. I wondered whether the cat girl part or the guest part irked him more. Not that we can make a particular difference in either one. I stowed the laptop, came down the aisle, climbed the steps of the platform, and approached the table near the lectern. There was a large pad of paper, a bottle of ink, a calligraphy brush, and a compass on the table along with the candles. The compass was for drawing circles on the paper. I studied the supplies a moment, then looked up at the teacher. May I use my own materials? His lips twisted. Suit yourself. I took out Tsu'na's box of conjuring supplies from her inventory and set it on the table. Then I fetched out the stone sheet we'd devised. It had 3 concentric circles engraved into the surface, covered with ink. The teacher peered at the sheet. Why 3 circles? My husband and I use them to organize categories of glyphs for easy reuse. We draw energy glyphs in the outer ring, glyphs common to types of materials in the next ring, and material-specific glyphs in the center. That way, if we want, say, different kinds of metal, we need only change the center. Different kinds of metal? You conjure that much metal? Yes, we make jewelry and other things. And you paint ink on the stone? Seems like a lot of work scrubbing it clean every time. That is not a problem for us. I reached into the box and drew out a marker. He scowled. What do you think you're doing? You can't conjure with a Sharpie. This is a fillable pen we got from an art store. We fill it with our conjuring ink, which you then have to scrub off the stone. We make our own formula. This is dry erase conjuring ink. He snorted. Nonsense. You can't just mess with the ink like that. I looked up at him. Then perhaps he will see me fail. That was a sharper tone than Tsu'na usually uses, but the guy was really getting under my skin. I actually felt my pulse pounding. I always thought my anger issues were glandular, that I had an anger gland that didn't seal very well, but maybe it was mental after all. Or the teacher was just that much of a dick. It shut him up at least. He folded his arms and stood there, glaring at me as I got to work with the pen. Copper was something we'd practiced with so much that I didn't even need to look at the glyphs. I wrote everything onto the stone, feeling not only the teacher's eyes on me, but the students as well. Everyone in the room was waiting for me to screw up. I switched to Black Mage. I should probably have cycled through Tsu'na's gear sets before leaving home, just to know what to expect, because rather than my Castro gear that was glamored to a black tux, I found myself in Tsu'na's Ishgardian-style full-length black dress. But I didn't have a lighter for the candles, and I wasn't about to borrow the asshat instructors, so thaumaturgy for the win. There were snickers when I changed outfits. Those died off when I channeled the smallest bit of ether and lit the candles with a wave of my hand. I touched Tsu'na's wand to the appropriate energy glyphs, focused to activate the construct, and saw the copper ingot appear in the center in a burst of released heat. I picked it up and extended it to the teacher. He took it reluctantly, inspected it, and finally said, "That will do. You may return to your seat." No acknowledgement of my methodology, no admission of my accomplishment, and giving me permission to do what he said when Tsu'na was only auditing the class to begin with. He didn't even return the damn ingot. I collected the box of supplies and a stone sheet and maintained control as I made my way up the aisle. I didn't huff, I didn't stomp, I didn't punch his godforsaken face in. I didn't even pretend to pay attention after that. I played games on my phone. If he had any useful insights to contribute on the subject of materials conjuration, I didn't hear them. When the class ended, I stalked out of the room. No one got in my way. I was in the hallway before I heard someone behind me. "Hey, Tsu'na, wait up." It was Tsu'na's friend, Anna, the one that had told her about the counseling. "What's the rush? Don't you want to get lunch?" I didn't know they were that sort of close. The day was turning out to be so educational. "I want to go home and relax. I tried to maintain my wife's measured tones. "Not happy." "For real? Today was a real asshat?" She giggled. "Yeah, so what was that you did with the fire? Was that a Miqult thing?" I reminded myself that ignorance isn't necessarily stupidity. Miqult are not magical creatures. That was elemental magic. Have you not studied that yet? "I think it's next semester." "Did you really make a dry erase spell marker?" "It is what makes the stone practical. Perhaps we can talk about this another day." "Oh, yeah, sure. Try not to punch your husband." I couldn't help but smile. That is what he is for. I didn't think about the dress until I was at the apartment door. There had been some funny looks on the way. It does look a little Salem-esque, maybe, but hey, it's for throwing fireballs after all. Tsu'na was sitting on the couch when I got home, dressed in my typical casual clothes, tablet in hand. She raised an eyebrow when she saw me in the dress, then the other when she got a good look at my face. "Have you been throwing fireballs, husband?" "Just had to light some candles." I wandered over to the couch and looked down at her. Our eyes met in a thoughtful silence. I decided to do what she felt so comfortable doing on occasion and sat in her lap, my lap, whatever. Had to try 3 times before I wasn't sitting on my or her tail. I rested my head against her or my shoulder. It really was pretty comfortable. I felt her or my arm drape around my or her shoulders. How was your day, my love? I asked. I think it was tense. I did not always know what to say. How do you do that? I make it up. Comes with practice. Your ears are not very good. My or her ear was hearing her or my heartbeat. It added to the comfort. No wonder she sat like that so often. I let myself relax. Did you have trouble hearing? I was not as distracted as I sometimes am, but I did hear some of them talking about you. They thought you were not as annoying as usual. I smiled. Also comes with practice. Did someone annoy you today, husband? I told her about the materials class. Did you punch him? No. I would not have minded. Yes, you would. He'd have demanded I kept my pet on a leash or something like that. I looked up at her or my face. Maybe you should punch him. Righteously indignant husband and all. He would not survive either of us punching him. And she smiled and rested a hand on my or her cheek. Thank you for showing restraint, husband. I had no idea you put up with that crap every day. I know. I needed you to understand that without me feeling like I was whining. Do you think I whine? You never have. That's just it. You're so good at being strong. I guess I don't think of something like social dynamics getting you down. You've been hinting at it, but I certainly wouldn't call it whining now. So, mission accomplished? I suppose. Does that mean you want to push the button now? We looked across the room where the box sat on the dining table. I nestled against her or my chest. She toyed with my or her ear. Tomorrow morning? Tomorrow morning. One more that I'll get into, and that actually is something I'm planning for book 2. It started out as a side story, but I think I'm going to use it in here. This is called Steve. Excuse me, this is by Steve. It's called Hunt. Can't get anything done. Can't concentrate. Can't make myself concentrate. Walking didn't help. Cider didn't help. Sat in the workshop and rewatched some Buffy episodes. Didn't help. Pre-Aors, yeah, I might have gone driving. No car now, or driver's license. Bus isn't the same. I'm not angry. I don't think I'm angry. Tsu'na's reaction was probably natural. Maybe if it had happened to her, I'd have felt the same way. It just wasn't useful. We had a run on our venison pie, so we needed venison. Plus, Tsu'na has an idea for deer hide blank books and wants the skin. Simple enough farming. Go find a deer, shoot, wait for respawn. Lather, rinse, repeat. Took a little while to find one. Maybe they migrate or something. When I did, it was one all by itself, so I couldn't perform herbicide. Just shoot the one over and over. Not a terrible fate, though, since I had workshop things to think about anyway. I switched to Bard, took my first shot, and waited while I mulled. The lightning bottle, what I'm calling a fuel cell, was looking good. At the moment, it depends on commercial capacitors, but Google says a capacitor can be as simple as two conductive plates and an air gap, so we might be able to make them. Maybe even adjustable, so we're not stuck with single voltage fuel cells. The water bottle is a failure without more ether food than I currently have. Fire and ice might be possible with thaumaturgy, and would be a good exercise in said ether food, channeling aspected ether in nice controlled amounts, but way more flashy than I desire. So, fire and ice bottles that look like hot and cold packs would be cool. Thinking about all that got me through waiting for two respawns. Look up, shoot, go back to thinking. Pity real life doesn't have hotkeys. It might be nice to have a flamethrower bottle, but since we don't craft by welding, I don't know what I would use it for. So instead, I'm thinking radiating coils looping through a concrete container, either solid metal or tubes of something, conducting heat and cold from the actualized fire and ice inside. Could be good for a space heater or a hot plate. The ice bottle could be refrigerating or ad hoc AC. More thinking, more shooting. Tsu'na calls gathering her Zen time. I was appreciating the notion. Maybe I appreciated it too much. At high enough level in the game, you don't ever miss. Tab key to select nearest target, 1 key to shoot, dead target. It's almost that simple in real life shooting when you're a level 80 bard, except you actually have to look. Haven't mastered this Hawkeye shooting over the shoulder thing yet. Missing isn't something that happens. Except it happened. Deer respawns. I'm lost in thought. I slap off a shot. Deer unexpectedly moves because real deer are dynamic, and instead of yet another kill shot, the arrow slices through the deer's rump. It staggers the deer a bit, then it straightens and dashes off into the brush, leaving me blinking like an idiot. Tsu'na once worried about what to do with a dead pig. I was confused about what to do with a not dead deer. Something in me was tempted to just write it off as a loss and go find another deer, but that wasn't how I was raised. I never hunted pre-Eorzea, but everything I heard or read about it said you don't leave a wounded animal. You finish the job. You end its misery. You owe it that as soon as you take the first shot. So I went after it. I could detect it as a fleeing combatant, even though I was doing all the combating and it wasn't great about the fleeing. But it was better than me at getting through underbrush, not tripping over roots or getting caught by thorns. It's likely that if it hadn't been wounded, I'd have never caught up to it, but I could tell that it was getting nearer. And then, there it was. Either the pain or the blood loss or the shock or the damage had worn it down, and I found it collapsed on its side, heaving and snorting. It was lying in a patch of yellow flowers. It saw me coming, but it did not or could not try to get up and run. It was so Bambi. Logic said this deer was a respawn, just like however many before had been, and there would be yet another respawn if I simply shot it again. It wouldn't suffer anymore, and wouldn't remember having suffered in a previous iteration. Pragmatism said I was there to hunt deer for meat and skin, and in case I hadn't noticed, here was a deer in front of me. So I should just shoot the damn thing and go back to the spawn point and wait for more. But Bambi. I didn't know how long I had until its wound made the decision for me. I wasn't thinking that clearly. I don't know how long I wavered, but sometime before it breathed its last, I switched to White Mage. I cast Cure. I watched it struggle to its feet and bound away. I looked after it. I looked down at the flowers, partly crushed by the deer's body and stained with its blood. I couldn't make myself hunt anymore. I got back and handed over what I'd gathered. When Tsu'na expressed surprise at how little it was, I tried to explain to her what had happened. What is Bambi? A movie about a deer. A movie? A cartoon movie. She didn't say anything more. She just stood there, blinking at me. Pretty sure she was trying very hard not to laugh at me, but she did pat me on the head. I'm fighting the temptation to go find the damn deer and shoot it one more time. And that was a collection of side stories, one of which has been adapted into a chapter. I do have more side stories, but I think it's time that I started reading at least little bits of book two and posting them somewhere. He didn't take the arrow out. No. I'm sort of hand waving that as part of the healing experience. And you remember that part that I was saying about the capacitor being two plates and an air gap? I had Joe read that story, and he made a point of saying an air gap is a terrible capacitor. But hey, Steve is software, not hardware. All right. Rowana, as the most responsive person here, was there anything you wanted to hear? I think you may have actually seen everything I've written for Echoes of Home. I'm not sure if you saw Button Button. That was written for the gem community. Oh, I do have infatuation. Or I could save it till next time. I might have had so far 4 or 5. I've lost count. I'll have to figure it out when I go over the mod. Well, here's one that I had written on impulse during the writing of book one, but I couldn't use it. However, after the ending of book one, this one works a little better. This is by Tsu'na and is called Hostage. Earth restrictions annoy me sometimes. I think they annoy husband too. There are so many things we could do if we did not need to worry about being seen doing them, and I do not even know everything I need to worry about. Our gathering is stealthful. No one has seen us doing it, or for whatever reason did not care. Our crafting is strange for Earth, though, so it must be done inside the workshop with the door closed and no visitors. The time I used energy siphon on the drive-by shooters in the car was effective, but husband worried it would seem strange for people to have died with no wounds. We were lucky then that the car crashed shortly thereafter. I do not know when I might ever throw lightning or fireball. It would be a time when it was more important to act than to worry about acting. So much worry, so many restrictions. I spent the morning in the workshop making plexiglass for the greenhouse. I would have liked to work outside in the fresh air and sun rather than making the workshop smell like the corn oil I made the plastic from, but I knew I should not be seen. I was glad to be done with restrictions when I finished the panels and decided to go to the diner for lunch. I locked the door to the workshop and heard shouting coming from the front of the pit. When I walked around, I saw what in TV videos is called a hostage situation. 2 men with guns were backing away from the pit. One of them was holding a woman with his gun pointed at her head. They were moving toward a running car with a man inside. I suppose it was the getaway car. Deputy Frank was in front of the pit, his gun out and pointed at the men. but he was not stopping them. They had guns, they had a woman captive, and they were trying to leave, and he was going to let them. I switched to Bard, drew my bow, and aimed an arrow at the hostage holder. He saw me and got angry, pointing his gun at me. "What the fuck do you—" was all he said before I shot an arrow into his eye. The other man started shooting at me, but he was frightened or a bad shot or both, as he did not hit me before I shot into his eye as well. The car suddenly made a loud noise and started to pull away. I switched to Dragoon, drew my lance, ran a couple steps, and performed spine-shattered dive, leaping into the air and driving the lance through the front of the car. The car made a choking noise and stopped suddenly. I lost my footing on the car and needed to hold tightly to the lance. I got my feet on the car again and yanked the lance free. The driver was still sitting in the car, staring at me. I swept the head of the lance through the front window and pointed it at his face. "Get out of the car! Now!" He got out. I jumped down from the car, threw him onto the ground, and got out some zip ties. I had his wrists and ankles bound by the time Deputy Frank came around the car with his gun ready. I stood up and looked at him. "Do you think you can handle it now?" Then I shifted to Earth normal and walked into the pit. I was angry. Frey would have approved. I sat at the bar. I needed to steady myself against the bar as I worked to lessen my anger. I tried to keep my voice quiet as I said, "Cider, please." Sam asked, "You okay?" "I just had to kill 2 men in a car because your Deputy Frank is as worthless as a bag of F-shite." "What's an eft?" "It is a thing that makes shite. Cider, please." Later, when husband was rubbing my shoulders and trying to get me to relax, he said, "You could have just acorn bombed them." "You told me here do not use magic in this world." "I did say that, didn't I?" He massaged silently for a bit, then said, "New project for the list. Sleep bomb. It was a good idea, but I will need a substitute for marble vine, or perhaps a marble." And maybe one more. This was written for Valentine's Day, or as is known in FF14, Valentine's Day. They have weird equivalents of real-life holidays in the game. This is by Tsu'na called Infatuation. Of the people who helped me with my cage fighting training, Mark has been the one about whom I was most uncertain. Ted knew about scripted fighting. Chester was most willing to try to spar with me. Scott understood the betting, and Tony, as much as he disliked us, knew actual martial arts. But what Mark mostly did was watch. Mark was a friend of Scott and Chester. I thought that was why he came with them, but perhaps that was an excuse to see me, or to watch me. He tried speaking with me a couple times, but ran out of things to say, and I did not have enough interest to help. I have fans elsewhere. At the bar where husband and I bounce, Sam says the people there are my fans. The people who watch me fight in the cage are fans. Husband has said that Mark is perhaps not as much a fan as a fanboy, which Google says is someone obsessed with something. But he had kept to his watching until last night after husband and I sparred to try out a move Ted had described. Husband is the only one whose strength matches mine, so we can put more sincere effort into fighting. Working with Chester after that tells me how much weaker I must be in the cage to not hurt people. So Mark and everyone else could see husband hit or kick or throw me hard enough to actually slow me down. When we took a break in our sparring, Mark approached me. "Hey, you okay?" "Yes, I am just thirsty." "You sure? Steve was hitting you pretty hard there." "That is what I need, yes. I need to know what to feel to know how to look like I feel it. Yeah, but how can he do that to you? He's your husband. Does he always treat you like that? When it is needed. That just seems wrong. I could never do that to you. I respect you too much. I studied Mark. You think my husband does not respect me? Not if he's willing to hurt you like that. He must not appreciate how special you are. And you do? Of course. You're beautiful, strong, capable, but I can tell there's more to you than that. I can see that you need the right man to help you explore your sensitive side, someone who cares more about you than a guy who's okay with punching you. I considered this, then turned. Husband. Husband looked up from talking with Scott. Yes, my love? Mark says you do not understand or appreciate me. Husband blinked. He met my eyes for a moment, then turned to Mark. Oh, I didn't realize you knew. Mark's brow furrowed. Knew what? That I don't understand my wife. She's a very complex woman with particular needs. I try to keep up with them, but half the time I just don't feel like I know what I'm doing. That's why I've been thinking about you. Me? Yeah, someone who understands people, someone who knows how to care, someone I can communicate with. Uh, Husband took a step toward Mark. I've been thinking about this for a while. I think you're who I need. I think we can be good for each other. I didn't want to say anything before, but I'm so glad you understand. Mark was frozen in place. I truly hoped this was some of Husband's theater. I tried to play along. Husband, I said. Mark approached me. Husband looked to me and back to Mark. No, that can't be right. We're clearly compatible. Yet he said he appreciated me. But I need him. I do not want to share. Husband sighed and switched to Dark Knight. Well, guess we'll have to do the Solomon thing. What is the Solomon thing? That's where we cut him in half and each take a piece. Oh, that does sound fair. Top to bottom or left to right? Top to bottom would be more even, I think. Agreed. He drew his huge two-handed sword. Hold him steady. Mark stepped back. Wait, what? We have to be fair about this, said Husband. I approached Mark. It is the only way. Mark stared wide-eyed at each of us, then looked to the other men for support. There did not seem to be any. He turned and fled from the room. After a moment, Chester started to clap his hands. The other men joined in. Husband switched back to Earth normal and took my hand, and we bowed together. He drew me into his arms. Do we understand each other, my love? I think we do, Husband. I think I wrote myself out of being able to use that, but I'm not sure. It'll take some athletics, possibly acrobatics, to make that usable. But hey, side story. And I think with that, I'm going to call it a night.